The Evolution Championship Series, better known as EVO, is the longest running and largest fighting game tournament in the world. Starting in 1996 with only 40 players, the past 26 years have seen it grow into the most prestigious event in the fighting game community, with the most recent year bringing in over 9,100 entrants to battle it out for a coveted top 8 medal. Between 1996 and today, the growth has been massive, but the consistently growing entrant numbers year by year and the reasons behind them tell a story not only of EVO, but the entire fighting game community. As EVO made its transition from city to city during its first decade or so, it was an era where records were not always as easy to keep and share as now. Streams hadn't even become commonplace yet, so we'll start off in 2010, after EVO had settled into Las Vegas as a permanent home. Held on July 9th through 11th, 2010, this was the first year of EVO being held in Caesar's Palace, one of the fanciest hotel and casinos on the Strip. Still primarily a Capcom fighter-centric event, approximately 1,700 entrants entered this event that included the recently updated new version of Street Fighter IV, Super Street Fighter IV, alongside the HD remix version of Super Street Fighter II Turbo, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, Tekken 6, and Melty Blood Actress Again. 2011 saw the event move back to the Rio Hotel and Casino, a venue it had used before. With a great year of fighting game releases, the event added Mortal Kombat 9, BlazBlue Continuum Shift 2, and Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Marking the very first time since EVO had gone to Las Vegas that non-Capcom games were the majority. With the hype around so many new games and a return to more affordable, close-by hotel rooms, numbers jumped around 150% of the previous year, hitting about 2,500 entrants. EVO 2012 returned to Caesar's Palace and saw entrant growth in the 4-digit range, with a total of approximately 3,500 entrants. This was the first year in a long time that didn't have a true anime fighting game as a main game, but did add newly released King of Fighters 13 that brought in over 1,000 entrants due to every single person entering getting a free shirt exclusive to the event. This unfortunately led to some of the highest amounts of disqualifications in any gaming event ever, due to no-shows from people who only wanted the shirt and didn't want to play in the bracket. 2012 also added recently released Soul Calibur 5 and a 2v2 team tournament for the new crossover game Street Fighter X Tekken. For a few years starting in 2013, a lot of the full entrant numbers were never fully announced, but we can look at the number of entrants for each game to give us a hint of how big the growth was. Street Fighter IV had just recently released a new version, Arcade Edition, and the hype for that game alone brought in close to as many people as the entire event from just 3 years ago. On top of that, with a move to a bigger venue at Bally's and Paris hotels, the number of main games increased to 9, with the addition of the newly released Persona 4 Arena, a fighting game based on the popular Atlas RPG, and Injustice Gods Among Us, a DC superhero fighting game from the developers of Mortal Kombat. 2013 also introduced a new way to decide the main game: a donation drive. The community who donated the most amount of money to cancer research by a certain date would have their game represented as a main game at EVO. This led to a very close race between Skullgirls, who raised $78,760, and Super Smash Bros. Melee, who won out with $94,683. Once again, the official numbers for 2014 were never released, but based on the entries per game, it seems like it may have been the smallest jump in entrants for any recent EVO. The newest and final version of Street Fighter IV had recently released, bumping the players for that just short of 2,000, but with only 8 main games instead of 9 like the previous year, and lower numbers across the board for everything but Street Fighter IV, it wasn't a huge year of growth. This would be different in 2015 though, with the introduction of Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U that had released in the previous year just slightly too late for EVO. With so many Smash players attending, both Smash for Wii U and Melee hit the barely sub 2,000 entrant mark, and cross-pollination between Smash players and traditional fighting game players meant that the numbers were up for every game across the board, with the highest entered game being Ultra Street Fighter 4 with over 2,200 players. 2015 also marked the release year of Mortal Kombat X, which brought an impressive 1,100 players just by itself. Despite the growth in 2015, nobody could have expected that the growth would be nothing compared to 2016. With the release of the newest version of Street Fighter V, the previous game entrant record of 2,227 was shattered by over double, with 5,107 entrants. That wasn't the only big change, as 2016 was also the first year that the top 8 finals of the highest entrant games would take place in an arena outside of the normal venue on Sunday, a tradition that has stuck around through the current day. On top of all of that, both Smash games from the previous year returned with higher numbers each, and Pokken Tournament made its debut, a Pokemon fighting game. While this was the final year that full entrant numbers weren't released, the number of combined competitor and spectator passes were almost 15,000, so it wouldn't be a far reach to guess that 2016 was the biggest year of growth that EVO had had up to that point. Unfortunately, that growth could not last, as 2017 pulled in a total of 6,812 entrants, only 1,700 more than were in just the Street Fighter V bracket alone the previous year. The excitement for Street Fighter V had gone down considerably, with a commonly believed weak release for the game that wouldn't be remedied until changes that Capcom would make years later. The Mortal Kombat spot had been taken by Injustice 2, the sequel to the DC game by the same developers. But Injustice 2 had also had a widely negatively received release, with players citing balance issues and oppressive projectiles as the biggest issues. Despite an unfortunate year for fighting games in general, this would be the year that EVO would make their almost permanent move to Mandalay Bay, a venue loved by attendees due to its closeness to affordable rooms from multiple hotels, and one that they would stay at through 2023. The EVO donation drive also returned this year, with Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 raising $71,690 and Pokken Tournament raising $66,906 in an extremely close race to become the main game that year. In 2018, Street Fighter V numbers had gone down for the second year in a row, the only 2 times that Street Fighter had gone down instead of up in entrant numbers since the release of Street Fighter 4 in 2009. Luckily, a new powerhouse was there to lead the way: Dragon Ball FighterZ, the 2D fighting game based on the Dragon Ball Z anime series, widely adored by fans of both fighting games in general and the anime itself. Dragon Ball FighterZ pulled in over 2,500 entrants just by itself, making sure the overall entrants for EVO grew almost 1,000 to 7,675. This marked the first time, possibly ever, that a non-Capcom game had been the headliner for an EVO, and it was certainly the first time since 2009 that a non-Street Fighter game had. 2019 saw the growth increase even faster than before. With Street Fighter V numbers going down for a 3rd year in a row, it still managed to hold on to the 2nd place spot with just below 2,000 players. But that was still almost half of the number 1 game, the newly released Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. As one of the most popular games of all time, not just as a fighting game, and the first EVO game to be played on the wildly popular Nintendo Switch, Smash Ultimate brought in almost 3,500 players and increased the overall entrant count to 9,230, within grasp of breaking the 5-digit mark. With rising numbers and 2 years of different subgenres of fighting games taking the spotlight as the number 1 game, the fighting game community was at the peak of its growth. And then it hit the biggest roadblock it had ever seen. In March of 2020, just a few months before EVO, COVID hit, and every event shut down. This is an entire story within itself, But somehow for EVO, that wasn't their only issue that year. Very quickly, the entire community correctly assumed that every major event would be cancelled for at least that year, but many events, including EVO, announced online tournaments to try and fill the void created with the loss of their main offline versions. Before this could even come to fruition, in an already shaky time for EVO, allegations came out online against a member of the top level of management within the EVO team, resulting in his resignation and the cancellation of the planned online event. With so much turmoil, both internal and external, the future of EVO was in peril. With things looking dark, nobody could have expected what came next when in early 2021, EVO announced that they had been bought out by none other than Sony, alongside esports company RTS, citing that fighting games had been a vital part of PlayStation's legacy since the very beginning. Suddenly, the community went from considering the chance that EVO could potentially never be run again to considering that it could be bigger than it had ever been. With offline events still off the table for 2021, EVO would return as a huge online event with tons of games, regions, and hundreds of hours of broadcasts. Finally, in 2022, EVO returned to Las Vegas as an offline event, but it started smaller than previous years, due to many players not feeling comfortable going back to in-person tournaments quite yet, and another big question in everyone's mind. How different would the first Sony-owned offline EVO be? Just over 5,000 entrants attended the event to find out, the lowest overall entrance for over a decade. However, the consensus was in. EVO was back and better than ever. Many members of the fighting game community had been brought in to leadership positions alongside the Sony acquisition, and it was a very successful move, with the community at large truly feeling like EVO was back. This also marked the fourth offline EVO in a row, where a different game ended up as the headliner. This year, the recently released Guilty Gear Strive. The positive reception in 2022 truly showed in 2023, with the largest growth of all time from year to year, as almost double the previous year showed up once again to Las Vegas with a total of around 9,200 unique entrants. One of the biggest boosts by far was the release of Street Fighter 6, a release that was very well received by the community. Aside from the record-breaking 7,000 plus that entered Street Fighter 6, numbers across the board went up from the previous year. Even though Guilty Gear Strive was the headliner last year, it had over 300 more entrants in 2023, a pattern that was seen with Tekken 7, Dragon Ball FighterZ, and Melty Blood Type Lumina. Once again, tying pre-EVO numbers with a huge bounce back, EVO 2024 has been announced for July 19th through 21st, moving venues for the first time in 7 years to a yet unannounced location. The days the convention floor are open have also been extended from 2 to 3, fixing a common complaint from attendees for years. With all the momentum going their way, will EVO finally break its limits or suffer more tragic setbacks? Only time will tell.